So just like everybody else at the moment, you're trying to buy your first house. What do you need to be thinking about? Time to think like an investor. Congratulations! You are doing what me and all these other millennials are planning to do all at once, which is joyfully enter the housing market at the highest valuations we have ever seen. That is fantastic. I'm happy for you that we can all get into this together and pay way too much and then finance these massively overpriced assets for the rest of our life. I'm just kidding. I really don't hate real estate that much. I really don't think we're in that bad of a time. But I'm gonna be honest, it's tricky to determine right now with what prices are doing. Are we in a bubble that's gonna correct and we should wait to buy property? Or are we now in some new normal where we should buy now before things continue to go up? That's kind of the nature of price changes. And today I wanna talk about buying your first property and some of the things that really hit me over the head like a baseball bat that I had to learn the hard way, that I think every young person should understand, but not a lot of people do. But first, before I hop into those things, I have to thank today's sponsor on this video, which is Railway Roasters. It is an incredible locally made coffee company right here in my hometown. And as a financial advisor, sometimes when I wake up, I don't really want to work and I'm grinding. So what I do is I brew a homemade pot of Railway Roasters so I don't have to blow all my money at Starbucks all the time. So make sure to hit that link in the description below to go get yourself a couple bags of coffee. Thank you, Railway Roasters, so much for sponsoring this video. Now, I want to explain to you something that I wish I would have known when I went to buy my first house, because when you're buying your first house, like you might be in the process of right now, it's so exciting. You're thinking about, wow, I could have a place that's my own, I could have the pride of ownership, and most importantly, I could start putting money into somewhere that is building equity for me. Screw this renting stuff where I'm just giving somebody money every month and getting nothing for it. I want to build equity and make improvements, and maybe a couple years down the line, I'll have a gain. I'll have built wealth in the value of this home. Not so fast. There is a massive glaring thing that hit me over the head the first time I ever opened my very first mortgage statement, like the annual statement where it shows how much you've paid in and the interest you've paid and where you're at with your balance. And it was this incredible experience of realizing for the first time how banks structure a mortgage. And most people don't know this, right? My mortgage payment was like $750 a month and the interest rate was like 3%. So I thought to myself, okay, $750 a month, multiplied by 97%, I'm probably gaining $725 of equity every month and 25 is going to interest. It's that simple. But the reality was I was paying more like 60% of my mortgage payment in interest. And if that's mind-blowing and you've never heard of this before, welcome to mortgage amortization. It is a structure of how banks really create loans and the way that they have you pay them. So let's say, for instance, your mortgage is $1,000 a month. When you start in those initial years, you are going to be paying way more interest than principal in that payment. And even though the payment continues to be $1,000 a month, over time, you start to pay more in principal and less in interest. But for those first few years, I was paying 60% in interest payments and only 40% of that was actually being added to the equity of my home. I mean, reducing the mortgage balance, if that makes sense. So when I looked at this mortgage statement at the end of the year, I realized I hadn't even made a dent in the mortgage outstanding. And I was kind of chapped. I was like, what's the point of this? I thought I was saving myself money renting, when in reality, I wasn't renting from a landlord, I was now just renting from the bank. You see, when you rent, the really nice thing about renting is that you get to keep your down payment savings, right? If you were gonna buy a house, but you choose to rent instead, all that money you would have had for a down payment, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, you get to keep for an emergency, or you get to invest it and have that grow. But the problem is that your monthly payment goes kaput, it goes nowhere. You may as well light it on fire. You're not really gaining equity with any of that. Now, the flip side of that whole picture is if you buy a house, you see your down payment vanish and that emergency fund and that what could have been your investments kind of goes away. It goes into the home. But now those monthly payments are building equity. Or so we thought, because the reality is only about 40% of those monthly payments are building equity. And 60% of it's kind of being burned in interest. Not to mention things like taxes and utilities and insurance and cable. All these expenses are not going towards equity. You're essentially burning that money. You're not ever getting it back. So I have a tendency to be a little bit biased towards thinking renting is much better than people make it out to be. I think renting isn't really that bad, and buying a house really isn't as great of an investment as people think. But I want to really clarify something here, which is what I hear all the time from a lot of clients. They say, okay,
I'm sick of renting, I'm sick of burning money. What I want to do is at least just get into a house for a couple years, maybe 3 or 5 years while I renovate it or make it my own. And then once I'm done with that small house, then I'll actually build or move into my lifelong home that I want to live in forever.
And to that I say, that is an atrocious idea. That is the worst idea you could possibly conceptualize when it comes to buying a house. And here's why. If all you're doing every single month is knocking like 40% of your monthly mortgage payment off of your mortgage balance, you're really not gaining that much in equity. And another thing to think about is when you go to sell that house, there's going to be real estate commissions, realtor commissions, right? Maybe 3 to 4%, land transfer taxes of 1%, lawyer fees of $1,000, maybe more. I had a client who had to spend $9,000 to break their mortgage contract prematurely. All of these things are going to dig in to that future equity when you sell that home, okay? So here's what I'm ultimately trying to get at. It's important not to fool yourself into thinking that if you just move into a starter home for 3 to 4 to 5 years, that you're gonna build up equity enough that you can pull that out and build your dream home. The reality is, if you are renting and you wanna move into a starter home, you are better off just maintaining that renting situation, because by buying a house, eating all those transaction costs and not really making any headway on the mortgage balance, you might end up erasing all of the small piece of equity you've gained just in the transaction costs when you sell. So it's not as if it's a problem to get a starter home. I'm not saying that, but don't fool yourself into thinking that that is an investment. And this is ultimately where my real estate philosophy comes from, which I mention a lot. There's only 2 ways you're likely to make money buying real estate. 1, if you live in it and own it forever, or 2, if you buy it and rent it to somebody else. If you're not doing one of those 2 things, it's probably a losing transaction. And the more you move and engage in real estate transactions through your life, for your primary residence, buying and selling, the worse off you're gonna be and the more you're gonna lose to transaction costs. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you to Railway Roasters for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out in that link below. If you want to support the channel, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.